Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the lecture. It's an annual lecture hosted by the Grenada National Reparations Committee. I am your host, Chrislyn Lashington. I am the CEO of Lashington Agency, a marketing and entertainment agency, and also a museum director. So officially welcome to the Grenada National Museum. It's a pleasure to host you here. And welcome to all of you watching us live on GIS. We are excited about this lecture. It's going to be on a topic that is very controversial. We're talking reparations, of course, but very important, we're going to be diving into republicanism as it relates to reparations. So this annual lecture is hosted by the Grenada National Reparations Committee, and it coincides with the birthdays of our former Prime Minister, the late Maurice Bishop, as well as the birthday of Malcolm X, a well-known activist in the United States of America, born to a Grenadian mother. So a very fitting topic, of course, reparations. To start us off this evening, we will begin with an invocation by Reverend Tim Byam of the St. George's Anglican Church.
Can we stand, please? In the name of Almighty God, the Father, Son, Heavenly Father, Jehovah, Jah, the Almighty One, we come here tonight, O Lord, to listen to lectures of our future. And I say this because, dear Lord, you know our future. You know where we are going, but we don't know the way. And so we ask you, dear Lord, that you will bestow your blessings upon the proceedings this evening. We ask you to enlighten our minds. We ask you for clarity from the lecturers, dear Lord. And we ask that as these discussions go on, that in accordance to your will, that it will come to fruition in future. We pray, Lord, that this evening will have purpose, and we will leave here with a satisfaction and an elevated mind. We ask these and other mercies which can be granted to us through your Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Byam of the St. George's Anglican Church. We're going to have a conversation today, and I'm really excited to hear what our guest speaker has to say. I will introduce him shortly, Dr. Francis Alexis. He will be doing the keynote address for us. I also want to recognize the presence of my fellow museum directors, Mr. Carlton Peter Antoine, as well as the Executive Director, Mr. Angus Martin, and of course, the Chair of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, Mr. Arley Gill, who has been leading the charge. The Reparations Committee in Grenada is cabinet appointed and of course attached to the CARICOM committee. And even though they started just in 2022, they have scored a major win by having one of the very first of its kind happening just in February, where we received an official apology from a family connected to our shared history between the UK and Grenada, as well as donations to various associations here in Grenada. So I think that is something that we must applaud the Reparations Committee for doing. Without further ado, I will welcome our Chair of the Grenada National Reparations Committee, Mr. Arley Gill, to give a few welcoming remarks to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Greetings, salutations to each and everyone who are here with us in person this evening, and for those of you who are following us on GIS live, as well on the different Facebook page, GIS Facebook, the Bob Report Facebook, and any other social media platforms. You know, these days you cannot do these activities without bringing it to people's homes or in their car with their phone. That's the new word. This is our third annual lecture put on by the Grenada National Reparations Committee. And as the chair correctly pointed out, we have these lectures in May so that it coincides with one I refer to as a quintessential Grenadian American, Malcolm Little, who was born to a Grenadian from Ladigue, and who made a tremendous contribution to the upliftment of Africans, not only in the United States of America, but to Africans on the continent and Africans throughout the diaspora. So his birthday, Malcolm X's birthday, is May 19th. And then we have another outstanding Grenadian, Maurice Bishop. He was born on May 29th. So for some reason, the month of May seemed to have produced two iconic Grenadians who have led the struggles for the upliftment of Africans at home and abroad. And as such, we try to have these annual lectures in the month of May, latter part of May, to commemorate Malcolm X and Maurice Bishop. Why we call this lecture Republicanism in the Age of Reparations? And some persons may ask, why is the Reparations Committee discussing the issue of republicanism? But I can say to you that in interviews that we have done, in public forums that we have hosted, persons always ask, how can you be asking for reparations from the United Kingdom and the monarchy continues to be our head of state? How do we reconcile that contradiction? How, on the verge of celebrating our 50th anniversary of independence, what is the relevance of the British monarchy as head of state in Grenada? So we want to start the discussion. We want to hear from you what you think. We want to hear from all of Grenadians at home and abroad, their opinions with regards to this particular issue. So that we believe that not only do we have the foremost expert on constitutional issues in Grenada, but the foremost expert on constitutional issues in the Caribbean and indeed the Commonwealth, and one of the leading minds on constitutional law in the world, Dr. Francis Alexis King's Counsel, to assist us in leading that discussion. So we especially welcome each and every one of you. And before I leave, we are trying, we started last year, and we hope we can do better this year. Emancipation Day, August 1st. The Grenada National Reparations Committee says African Dress Day. So we want to encourage all our brothers and sisters who are here and who are listening to us to at least purchase your African wear now. You know that we wear European clothing every day and no one says anything. But anytime you put on something that looking African, they ask you what he or she playing. So I want us to play on August 1st as we, in some way, lift the consciousness of our people in a very significant way. And on Emancipation Day, August 1st this year, is African Dress Day in Grenada, and I want to encourage all of our fellow countrymen and women to join us. So please enjoy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arley Gill, Chair of the Grenada National Reparations Committee. I'm looking forward to the boutique. I like your shirt. Hopefully you're selling that in time for Emancipation Day this year. I want to paint a picture for those of you, especially watching us live. We are in the Grenada National Museum, a very historic building in the heart of St. George's. We are surrounded by art, by local artisans. I see work from Teddy Frederick around. There's a huge canoe and artifact right on the side of me, and there are a number of people who really care about our heritage in the room. So it is definitely a fitting scene to have this conversation on republicanism and reparations. To add a little bit of spoken word to it, I'll invite a poet and recently an author of her very own book, Shackled Liberation. Let's welcome Donella Hosten.
A pleasant evening to everyone. Just to add to one of the special dates in May 25th, that is African Liberation Day. Right? Yes. So I'm going to do two pieces today. I was torn. I have a lot of pro-Black pieces. So I was torn between what I should do, but I'm hoping that these two bring out at least the energy that I wanted to bring out. The first one is I need to write. This was a piece written very long ago, but I always feel that need to write, so I always revert to that piece. I need to write, to get out all my thoughts, to figure out what is and what's not. In this world that we live in today where everything seems to be in disarray, but we accept it as okay. I need to write about that man who died for us, who suffered and bled to death on Calvary's cross, about the deeds we do and we know they're evil, yet we continuously do them, then blame the devil. I need to write about the history of me, about great men like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, who fought for equality so that generations after them could live in prosperity. I need to write about all these things, about being discriminated because of the color of my skin, about the Black people who wish they were not. I'm telling you, this has got to stop. I need to write. I need to write about my forefathers who were auctioned off and sold by slave traders. They were beaten and whipped across their backs, and the only crime they committed was being Black. I need to write. I need to write about our Black history, about the dreadful days when we were victims of slavery, when our forefathers were stripped of their rights and found themselves in some deadly plights. I need to write. I need to write about the bloody wars that we fight, about the innocent people who lost their lives and the soldiers who never returned home to their children and wives. I need to write. I need to write because I have the right to write. About that right that you tried to take from me when you didn't want me to be who I wanted to be. When I was striving to be somebody and you told me that I was a nobody. I need to write because I never thought I'd live to see the day when the United States would have a Black president and women would be allowed to be rulers of nations and make such significant decisions. I need to write to show you that I can make it, that I no longer have to stick that I can rise above your criticism because I am overflowing with confidence and optimism. I need to write about what is real, about what I taste, touch, and feel. I need to write because it is my right to write about my need to write. Thank you. The second piece is called The Story. This is a story about my journey through history. So listen to me as I tell you his story, her story, that part of history that was left out of their story during the days of slavery when they took us from our mother country and tried to destroy our Black identity. You do not know the beginning, but let me tell you something. The color of your skin does not determine your ending. And no, it is not a sin to be Black. As a matter of fact, those before us have created a path that we must follow. We must not dwell in our past sorrows, but look forward to a brighter tomorrow. Leave behind the oppression, depression, regression, suppression, and carry with you the lifelong lesson that will make you a better person. For just 1 minute of your life, forget about being black or white. Erase those colored lines and put your pen to paper and write. Let the words that you write bite them, fight them, ignite that fire within them, because this is his story, her story, that part of history that was left out of their story. Let your words be like blood, rich and thick like the mud in which they plant their crops, and you must not stop until they have realized that you cannot be fooled by their lies. Let them see that you have read their story, but you know his story, her story, that part of history that was left out of their story. Let them see that we are on a journey to reclaim our black identity. Thank you.
I need to write because I have the right to write. Thank you, Donella. Very well done. 2 pieces there. And of course, she is an author of the book Shackled Liberation. And it's so important for us to write, right? We need to start documenting our heritage a lot more. So thank you so much. We're moving ahead into our keynote address for the evening. And this will be done by Dr. Francis Alexis, KC. He is a prominent lawyer and former politician, attorney general, parliamentarian, and law professor. He completed a Bachelor of Arts, LLB, LLM degrees at the University of the West Indies, and a doctorate in law at Cambridge University in the United Kingdom. For many years, he was a senior lecturer and a deputy dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies. He currently serves as Director of Postgraduate Administrative Law and Director of Postgraduate Constitutional Law, put on online by the Faculty of Law at UWI, Cave Hill, Barbados. Following the U.S. invasion, Dr. Alexis returned to Grenada and became involved in politics. In 1984, he contested elections for the NNP and won, serving under Prime Minister Blaise. He resigned in 1987 and with George Brezan founded the NDC, which won elections in 1990, serving under Prime Minister Brathwaite. Though he won his constituency in the 1995 elections, his party lost. The deputy leader of the NDC, he resigned in 1995 and formed his own party, the Democratic Labour Party. In the 1999 elections, the DLP formed a united Labour coalition with the GULP, but was unsuccessful, losing his first election since 1984 and gradually bowed out of frontline politics. Dr. Alexis has been a critic on the island's antiquated hold on the British monarchy and institutions like the Privy Council, believing that as long as we give institutions in Britain a formal role in our constitutional affairs, we perpetrate lack of self-worth and self-esteem. An expert in constitutional law, he chaired Grenada's Constitutional Reform Advisory Committee from 2014 to 2016. He has been deputy chairman of the Regional Judicial and Legal Services Commission, one of the mechanisms which underpin the CCJ. Former Grenlaw Chambers in Grenada, Alexis practices in the courts of several Caribbean countries, including UKPC. Dr. Alexis is the author of several articles and books, including H. Aubrey Fraser, Eminent Caribbean Jurist of 1985, a 1991 Grenada, the Constitution and You, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court Model Regional Court 2007, and the second edition in 2015 of Changing Caribbean Constitutions, as well as in 2020, Sir Dennis Byron Law Legend. A decorated and, of course, most fitting person to present this keynote address. Let's welcome Dr. Francis Raphael Alexis, KC.
Thank you very much indeed, Sister Lashington, for that very warm introduction. It is good to see so many of you coming to share our thoughts this afternoon. I begin by extending most profound thanks to the Grenada National Reparations Committee for kindly inviting me here to deliver this lecture. I pay tribute to members of the committee for affording invaluable information on reparations. In particular, I point to the excellent leadership being provided on the subject by the chair of the committee, Mr. Arley Gill, the very enlightening research being done on reparations and our culture generally by Mr. Angus Martin, and the electrifying energy being put into the exercise by Mr. Rochelle Charles. I pay tribute to the leading regional CARICOM reparationist, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, my Vice Chancellor over at UWI, who is affording the Caribbean the very excellent intellect he has and his singular capacity for perseverance. And I remember Mr. Darby Nomad of Antigua and Barbuda, who is also a leading reparationist. You have been told why we are here in May. It has to do with, among other things, the birthday of Morris Bishop, and the birthday of Malcolm X. I was very lucky to meet Ms. Telfer just now, who was explaining to me that Malcolm X's mother was from La Digue, and the lady knows her name as Louise Langdon. She married a Reverend Little over in the States. So I'm grateful to you, Fistal, and take about personalizing, and she's doing some research on Miss Langdon, yes, correct? A PhD on that. We are very happy to have you here. May month is also the month of Mother's Day. And we reflect on the troubles which African women experienced during slavery and beyond. You know the background to why we've been here, and I don't have to go into that background in detail. Shortly, after some 200 years or more of Europeans kidnapping Africans from Africa, taking them in dungeon-type ships across the Middle Passage over the Atlantic, and enslaving us here in the Caribbean, the time came in 1833 when the UK Parliament passed an act, we could call it the Slavery Abolition Act, abolishing slavery, that's slavery. And a clause in the act provided some 20 million pounds sterling for the slave owners as reparation, compensation. But no reparation was paid to the slaves. And we come here today to sound the clarion call that they will be hearing from us a lot more about this going forward. This committee is demanding that the UK government and successors to the planters who received that compensation make proper reparations, not only for the slave trade and slavery, but for the genocide perpetrated on the first peoples of the region, and Dr. Martin is the expert on that. So I pick up the story when in 1963, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie was addressing the United Nations General Assembly, and he warned that to destroy subhuman bondage in Southern Africa, Africans would fight if necessary. And he declared, these are his words, "We are confident in the victory of good over evil." As you know, Bob Marley picked up that theme too. On that inspiration from Selassie, prophetic it was, there is no longer apartheid in Southern Africa. From the land of the Queen of the South, and you know the story about Haile Selassie and the Queen of the South, and at other times a vanguard. For example, it may well be, if you look at the Bible properly, it may well be that the first convert was from Ethiopia. You remember that the Ethiopian Minister of Finance was traveling in his regalia, and one of the first apostles came up to him and asked him what he was reading there, and he was baptized. Now, whether it was Paul or the Minister of Finance Ethiopia, or whether it was the Roman soldier, the Bible is not very clear. So it is open. At the very least, he was one of the very first converts. So what was the law of the United Kingdom during slavery? This is the heart of the matter. That is where we base our argument about the slave trade and slavery being crimes against humanity. What was the law of the United Kingdom at the time? Remember, the British came to the Caribbean just after 1620, at first in St. Kitts 1623, Barbados 1627. A decade or so before then, the Chief Justice of England told us what was the relevant constitutional law of England. And this is how he put it. Lord Chief Justice Cook, talking in 2010 in a case called Bonham's case. He said that, and I quote, "Where an act of Parliament," talking about the UK Parliament, "is against common right and reason or repugnant, the common law will control it and adjudge such act to be void." That's the pith and substance of our case, because the Lord Chief Justice is saying not even an act of the UK Parliament can go against what he called common right and reason or be repugnant. Now, that thinking of Lord Chief Justice Cook came across the Atlantic. That was the year, remember, just 1610. The Americans had their revolution in 1774. And the question arose in 1803. What was paramount in the United States? Is it the law of Congress or is it the law of the Constitution? And this is how it was answered by Chief Justice Marshall in 1803. He said, "A law passed by the United States Congress, held by the Supreme Court to be inconsistent with the Constitution, is void," which is the exact number that Chief Justice Cook used in England in 1610. Fast forward to the Caribbean now in 1967. A case is arising in Trinidad and Tobago, and some trade unionists are complaining that the act of the Trinidad and Tobago Parliament is inconsistent with the Constitution. The Attorney General is contesting to the court that the Supreme Court cannot review any act of the Trinidadian Parliament in independence. And this is how Chief Justice Wooding and the whole court answered that contention. The Chief Justice said, the Supreme Court has the power and the duty to review any act of the Trinidadian Parliament, and if we find it inconsistent with the Constitution, we are duty-bound to declare it void. So whether it's the Chief Justice of England, the Chief Justice of the United States, the Chief Justice of Trinidad and Tobago, the common word is void. That was in 1610, Coke is talking in England. It was not until 1885, long after the abolition of slavery in 1833, that for the first time a question is arising in England as to whether a court in England can strike down an act of the UK Parliament after Coke. The spokesperson is Professor A.V. Dicey of Oxford, very reputable name. And he is now arguing at Oxford that no court of law may strike down an act of the UK Parliament on the doctrine of UK parliamentary sovereignty. So that's the first time you are hearing in England that an act of the UK Parliament cannot be struck down. Now, Professor Sir Ivor Jennings over at Cambridge, he's saying that Lord Coke was no heretic when he said what he said in 1610. And we have constitutional writers over in the United States, I have some in the paper here, who make the point that Chief Justice Marshall was inspired by the thinking of Chief Justice Coke. And we know that Chief Justice Wooding was inspired by the whole line of Chief Justices. If Coke was right, it must follow that any act enslaving one another must be illegal, because the UK Act can't make it legal, according to Coke. It follows that no individual can do it in any event, and this is the crux of my case, in any event. Let it be assumed that Dicey is right. No court can challenge a UK Act of Parliament. In any event, my dear people. Nobody is challenging any UK Act of Parliament when we say that slavery was illegal. There was no act of the UK Parliament saying you can go to Africa and kidnap people and bring them to the Americas. So we are not challenging any act of the UK Parliament. So even if Dicey is right, we have no business with him. And he has no business with us. They were running their slavery through what? Not an act of the UK Parliament, but through what? Letters patent issued by the monarchy, commissions issued by the monarchy, and not even Dicey is suggesting that we can't challenge those. His theory is that you can't challenge an act of the UK Parliament. Well, I don't have time this evening to debate him on that. I've written about that. Because my point is that even if he is right, we are not challenging any act of the UK Parliament. We are challenging things that were done by the monarch, the kings and the queens, issuing letters patent. So throughout slavery, starting in 1638 down to 1833, the law of the UK was that you cannot do anything which is against common right or reason or which is repugnant. And let's look at what the Court of England said about slavery in England. An American kidnapped an African off the coast of West Africa. He was taking him to Jamaica to sell him into slavery there. The ship pulled in at the River Thames in London, and they had this man Somerset on board. The anti-slavery movement in England got word that Somerset was aboard the ship. So they organized to have an application made to the court in England for habeas corpus, a writ to set him free. The matter comes up for another Chief Justice, this time Lord Mansfield, Chief Justice. He says this: he realized that if he set the slave free, Somerset, massive financial losses would incur to slave owners. But that did not deter him. He proclaimed, fiat justitia ruat coelum. In other words, let justice be done though the skies shake. He declared, this is the point now, the air of England was too pure for slavery to breathe in. Slavery, he said, was not permitted by the common law in England. He issued habeas corpus and ordered the black Somerset must be discharged. So those are two cornerstones in our case. One, on Chief Justice Cook, not even an act of the UK Parliament go against common right and reason, let alone an act of a private individual. Secondly, from Lord Justice Mansfield, the air of England is too pure for slavery to breathe in. How come then the British were allowing slavery in the colonies? So they have one law for England and another law for overseas. The British knew what Lord Mansfield said was true. Let me tell you about an incident. One of the financiers of Sir John Hawkins, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I, read papers that Hawkins had been kidnapping Africans off the west coast of Africa and bringing them to the Americas. Her Majesty condemned the criminal practice, not my words, condemned the criminal practice and forbade any further criminal conduct by English slave traders. She went on to call what was being done as something, in her words, that would call down the vengeance of heaven. Those are her words. And you could find that in Professor Beckles' book, Britain's Black Death. Now, Her Majesty was correct to so reflect. For the book of Exodus in the Bible shows what vengeance, her word, what vengeance our Creator God can wreak on human beings, even a monarch as Pharaoh, who subject human beings to bondage, slavery. Such slavery need not be aggravated by the racial discrimination which made more malignant the slavery of Africans by Europeans in the Caribbean. So she was right on board. She said this would call down the vengeance of heaven. But what did she do after saying so? She continued financing Hawkins' slave trading activities. He pressed on with his kidnappings, and the Queen did not even lift a finger to make sure that there were no more kidnappings. But the point is, she knew it was criminal. She said so. Now was Queen Elizabeth I alone among British royals in raking in profits from the slave trade and slavery. You had such companies as the Royal African Company, in which royals invested. Sometimes they even tried to monopolize the trade. It was so profitable, these royals and them. So the time came when the slave trade ended in 1807. When the British anti-slavery movement in England started to grow in numbers and in influence, people of the likes of William Wilberforce, eventually slavery was abolished. Why was it abolished? Well, if you went to school in the 60s, you heard a lot about William Wilberforce. But it turns out that Caribbean cane sugar produced by unpaid slave labor became uneconomic for capitalism, uncompetitively more expensive than European beet sugar produced by beet labor. And this economic factor is what is emphasized by Eric Williams of Trinidad and Tobago in his Oxford doctoral thesis, which he published as that classic, Capitalism and Slavery. So what he was saying in his doctoral thesis is that all those British historians who have been talking about humanitarianists and abolitionists, they're not looking at the facts and figures. The facts and figures, he argued in his thesis, showed that slave-produced sugar in the Caribbean had become uncompetitive compared with beet-produced sugar in Europe. And that is what, at the end of the day, brought about the abolition of slavery. Well, you may think that there was some of the humanitarianism, and I could agree with you. You may think that there was some of the capitalism, and I could agree with you too. All of that went into the melting pot. And there was another factor too, the activities of the slaves in the Caribbean, because they were getting up to so much rebellion that it affected the profitability of the business. It affected the preparedness of Europeans to come and stay in the region. Word got out. You know, in 1951, there was a little activity up at Latant, and Eric Gary could not get the British to move, to accept his wage demands. A little activity up in Latant, about 3 people got killed. It made world news, and immediately the British had to capitulate to Gary. That is how things happen in the real world. Similarly, when the slaves rebelled, word got around. Yes, those were not the days of high-speed technology, but word got around nonetheless. So that contributed too to the end of slavery. And so we come now to 1833. And I told you in the background that in that Slavery Abolition Act 1833, the United Kingdom Parliament put in, and I'm reading from the Act, 20 million pounds sterling, which would equate today, I see we have some bankers here, if I'm wrong, they can correct me, about some 200 billion pounds today. I got it from the internet. So those were reparations for the wrongdoers. What about the people who had been wronged, the slaves? What did they get as reparations? They got not 1 cent. Can that be right? You're compensating the slave owners who brutalized the slaves physically, who exploited them economically, and you're now compensating them, and not a cent for the former slaves. What then is the rationale for reparations? I'm not going to read the whole paragraph I have here, but essentially you can see that reparations do a number of things, including heal wounds between the enslaved and the slave owners, give to the former slaves a start in life on their own, among other things. You will get a copy of the document. Now, there's nothing new about reparations, what we are talking about today. There are many chapters in history about reparations. One of the best you know, Hitler had decimated the Jews, some 6 million, and Hitler's country, Germany, has been paying reparations. The Japanese, with their activities out in the East, with their comfort girls and so on, they have been paying reparations. So nothing new about that. But the point I want to emphasize now is this. Not only did the freed people not get any reparations, they were not given any start in life at all. No housing, no public health facilities. It's a wonder that they survived at all. The plantation owners, rather than employ the ex-slaves and pay them a decent wage, they went all the way to Asia, to India, China, Hong Kong, and they brought in indentured workers. But the ex-slaves roam in the countryside, nothing to go by. It's a wonder they ever survived at all. Now I want you to compare Lord Mansfield in that Somerset case with another case which arose in about 1827, just before abolition. Somerset was a black man kidnapped off the coast of Africa. An Antiguan slave ran away from Antigua and made her way to the United Kingdom. Her slave owners found out, and they went to the Privy Council. The Privy Council. You heard me. And what did the Privy Council say? The Privy Council said that in a case called Slave Grace, the woman Grace couldn't be kept as a slave in the UK because Lord Cook had already dealt with that. But the Privy Council said she could be sent back to Antigua, back into slavery. This is the Privy Council talking, you know. It's a little awkward for them. Why? The Privy Council, simply, the Privy Council was advisors to the queens and kings, so they couldn't go there saying anything that would upset the king or the queen. And we have seen numerous instances since then of the Privy Council being in this awkward kind of situation. Let me give you 2 examples. You know that the United Kingdom is the home of competition in business. The government of Dominica wanted to give a little competition to cable and wireless. They wanted mapping telecoms to come into Dominica and get a piece of the cake. What did the Privy Council say? I'm not talking about centuries ago. This case was decided by the Privy Council in 2000. You know what the Privy Council said? Dominica is a small place, so it may well be you need a little monopoly there for cable and wireless. Who was the Privy Council defending, Dominica or cable and wireless? Let me give you another instance. The Jamaica Parliament passed 3 acts. They wanted to move Jamaica out of the Privy Council into the CCJ. What did the Privy Council say? 1, they have no interest in this case, nothing to do with them. But these acts are unconstitutional for reasons I can't fathom. One of the things, the most outstanding thing about this case is that the Privy Council asked the lawyers on both sides to give them written submissions as to how Jamaica could get out of the Privy Council. They got the submissions, and what did the Privy Council turn around and say? Thanks for the submissions, but we wouldn't bother answer the question today. Isn't that fooling around with black people now? So they have the opinion, but nobody in the world can tell you what Jamaica needs to do to get out of the Privy Council, short of going to the utmost. So we are accustomed to the Privy Council, and after they decided that case from Jamaica, you know what the Privy Council did? For the first time in their history, they sat outside of England. Where did they go and sit? In the Bahamas. And what did they say out there? We like being in the Caribbean, don't get rid of us. Oh, that's so prostitutional, really. Thanks to the work of your committee, sir, and the CARICOM Reparations Commission, some private consciences are being pricked. Earlier this year, the Trevelyan family members came across. You saw them down at the Trade Center, apologizing and making reparations. Last Saturday, Chairman Gill led a team on the internet to discuss with a couple from New Zealand. They're over in New Zealand, discussing, apologizing, and making reparations. And that such initiatives are underway. Thanks to the committee. Give them a big round of applause, please. And thanks to the Beckles Commission of the Middle. We hope that with people like the Trevelyan's coming forward and apologizing, a message would be sent to such places as number 10 Downing Street and Westminster and Buckingham Palace, and they too would have a heart. So we've been talking about monarchism. What is monarchism as we have known it in the Caribbean? Three things might be said. One, throughout the entirety of slavery, 1638, 1838, British monarchs, kings and queens, were literally governing Britain and their colonies, exercising actually the executive authority of the state, directly or through subordinate officers, whether in the UK or here overseas. That's the first point. So the monarchs can't come and blame it on the street politicians. They were running the country at the time. Secondly, we know that monarchism has evolved, that today in the United Kingdom, King Charles III doesn't run the country. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet do so. But we want to say a little thing about this phrase, the executive authority. You keep hearing about the executive authority. Paul Schoon wrote a book, and in that book he talks about the executive authority. We could define the executive authority of the state as the full amplitude of the powers of the state, except for two sectors. One, the making of laws for peace, order, and government, which is vested by the Constitution and Parliament, and two, interpreting laws, including the Constitution, and applying them to cases, which is vested in the judiciary. All the other areas of the state, all, recognizing foreign governments, etc., they are part of the executive authority of the state. And we know that British monarchism is hereditary. Monarchism does not have to be hereditary. It could be elective. But the monarchism we know across the Commonwealth, exported by Britain to us, is an elective one. Those 3 points lead to this. Throughout slavery, the British monarchs were themselves calling the shots. Secondly, they were among shareholders or promoters of companies which traded in slaves and perpetrated slavery. Thirdly, some British loyals owned the slaves and estates. We know that. Read Beckles' book or any standard book of Caribbean history. On those facts, it is only proper that King Charles III, the present British monarch, should publicly acknowledge that British participation in the slave trade and perpetration of slavery were crimes against humanity for which British royalty, even if separately from the state, would make appropriate reparations. So too with genocide against the First Peoples. It is not simply a matter of King Charles saying in public that these occurrences cause, in his word, regret. That's not sufficient. His Majesty needs to comply with the CARICOM 10-point action plan prescriptions on a full formal apology set out in that document. So where are we in the Caribbean? We can't continue under these royals. They enslaved our ancestors. They paid us no reparation. They set us free on the Caribbean landscape and we had to fend for ourselves. Our thesis then is that other Caribbean countries should follow Guyana, and we mourn for Guyana in the death of those 20 or so young people a few hours ago. Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica and Barbados in jettisoning British monarchism and adopting republicanism. So what is republicanism? I could deal with that in 2 minutes really. We can define republicanism as a system of government in which the head of state, call him president, represents that state itself. He is the embodiment of that state, not the representative of a foreign dignitary, coming out of the sinews of that state, thereby improving sense of self-respect of the people of that state. They see the head of state and they know this is one of their kith and kin, sharing their own expectations going forward. But I have to warn you, and I can deal with these 4 paragraphs in only one. The truth of the matter is that in most Caribbean countries, to move monarchism into national republicanism, we have to do 2 things. One, we have to get the parliament to come up with, generally speaking, a 2/3 majority vote on the bill, supporting the bill. And secondly, that bill has to come to us, the people, and we too have to give a 2/3 majority support to the measure. Are you ready for that? Are you ready? Well, time will tell. Our leaders have to lead. Follow people like Mia Motley. Go down into the trenches among the people and make it a policy, a high policy of the state. In any event, the British cannot get away from reparations by saying you have moved into republicanism. The debt is owed not to the monarch of Grenada. The debt is not owed to the government of Grenada. It is owed to the people of Grenada. So whether we are in monarchism or republicanism, they have to pay the debt one fine day. Let's go over then to see what happened in Haiti. Haiti became independent of France after slaves in 1791 in Haiti. Then Saint-Domingue led by a slave, Toussaint Louverture, revolutionarily abolishing slavery and overthrowing France. The leader of France at the time, you know what his name was? No less a big name than Napoleon Bonaparte. He sent troops to Haiti to capture Louverture, to restore slavery, and to bring back France. And you read so much about Bonaparte, you will think this man was a big libertarian, you know. Sending troops back to Haiti. They did capture Louverture, they did take him to France, he did die in France, but that did not stop the Haitian Revolution. Louverture's successor, Jacques-James Dessalines, a former slave himself, took up the mantle, and the Haitian Revolution lived on. So Haitians might have expected that their revolutionary fraternal comrades in France, having just had their revolution in 1789, would have helped them. Helped them? I just told you what happened. They captured Louverture. Nor did France pay any reparations to Haiti for the years that France gouged wealth out of Haiti's natural resources, while exploiting and brutalizing Haitian African slaves. On the contrary, what France did was this. Bonaparte sent battleships into Haitians' waters, extracted from Haiti a 150 million francs, what he called indemnity, in claims over property, including slaves, which he said France lost in Haiti because of the Haitian Revolution. And if Haiti didn't pay this 100 million francs, Haiti could not get diplomatic recognition abroad, while French warships were in Port-au-Prince. This total in today's money, $21 billion. Yes, it was reduced in 1838 and marked the year 1838 because France is realizing Britain is freeing slaves in the Caribbean. So 1838 is reducing the debt to 90 million francs. But Haiti paid France about 112 million francs in total by 1947. Those payments which the French call indemnity, we call them reparations. And they have left the Haitian economy reeling. They are really reverse reparations, because it was France who should have been paying Haiti. But without any heart at all, Haiti was called upon to pay France. And you know what the legacy is today, still today in Haiti. It's a short line from 1947 to now, because those are the many years I have been alive, born in 1947. What France did to Haiti was evil. And you know, they say sometimes what goes around comes around. Reparationists globally should demand that France pay Haiti reparations on those reparations. This would be good. you can now be relieved. I have 1.5 minutes more and I will finish it. Wholly undesirable are our continuing this state of affairs in which Britain is not paying. We know the University of Glasgow signed with Professor Hilary Beckles. We know the Trevelyan's have come to town. So private businesses are having a pricking of the conscience and are calling upon the British authorities similarly to have that too. Your committee, Mr. Gill, must vigorously stay on its mission of pressing the UK to make good on reparations which should have been forthcoming since 1838. And we urge, let the committee so press on under the inspiration of the exhortation by Haile Selassie, that is, be confident in the victory of good over evil. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Francis Alexis, for that spirited and informative lecture, that keynote presentation. We are going to open up the floor for questions and answers, so he will be close by. However, before we move there, I want to recognize my chair on the board for the museum. I didn't see her earlier, but she's here. Shireen Francis, and attorney at law. Thank you so much for being here with us. We are going to have an introduction on the survey as it relates to Republicanism, and this will be presented by John Angus Martin. He's a historian, authors include, he also on the Grenada Revolution with Dr. Nicole Philip Dow, multiple books. He is also the executive director at the Grenada National Museum, and also my colleague on the Proud of My Heritage project, which is a collaboration between the Grenada National Trust and UNESCO. So let's welcome John Angus Martin.
Hello, everyone. Really happy to be here for this discussion. In doing this lecture, one of the things we thought about doing is a very unscientific survey, come up with a few questions about republicanism, referendum on Grenada. So if you haven't done so, we would like you to take that survey. But one of the things that came out of the survey, the idea of referendum. A lot of people, several of the people who filled in the survey said that a referendum is costly because we have done referendums. I think Grenada has become referendum shy. I think governments are afraid of referendums. So that has become an issue in terms of the cost of it. And some people are even asking, should we have a referendum? Barbados did not have a referendum. I think it has to do with our specific constitution. Grenada receiving a constitution in the 1970s, Barbados was earlier. The issues over, I think, our constitution, because it was attained under Eric Gairy, and there were attempts to keep Gairy in control, sort of, that certain things were put into the constitution so that Gairy would not be able to do as he pleased. So in discussing this, a fellow colleague had brought up some ideas that he had on the fact that we may not have to do a referendum. There are other ways that we might be able to approach republicanism. So I would like to call on Mr. Ewart Lane to give his opinion on what are the other ways we might be able to approach republicanism in Grenada?
Good night, everyone. Dr. Alexis, and I know that I'm entering into maybe heresy because Dr. Alexis recognizes the constitutional law guru has stated that we need to have a referendum. I just want to point out that this month May also, it is 50 years since the conference, the constitutional conference that was held in Marlborough, Britain. It was in May 1973, and the constitution that we have in Grenada now emerged from that. That's the first point I just want to make, just to mark that. Secondly, it is quite interesting that the dictate, I will call it, that we have a referendum actually came out of an order in council for Britain. In other words, we received independence, we received the independence constitution, which was really an annexure to an order in council from the British government. And the British government is saying in that order in council, yes, there was a constitutional conference, that listen, at least on the surface it appears to be saying so, that there are certain laws in this constitution, including the laws governing the head of state, which requires, as Dr. Alexis said, 2/3 in the parliament, 90 days between the first and the second reading, 2/3 in a referendum. Interestingly, and that's my point, in surveying the Constitution, I think it is quite striking that the very clause in the Constitution, namely Section 106 of the Constitution, which says that the law is the supreme law of the state, any law that is inconsistent with it shall be void. When we hear a lot tonight. But what is quite striking to me, at least, is that section is not a deeply entrenched section of the Constitution. In other words, you don't have to have a referendum. It is not one of the sections mentioned under Section 39 and Schedule 1 of the Constitution, which requires a referendum to alter it. And my thinking is, and I plan to go into it deeper, to even write on it, my thinking is that one can tinker with that section, the supreme law section of the Constitution, to bring about certain changes. In other words, one can say, you can enact following the 2/3 in Parliament, which is required for ordinary entrenched laws. You can enact a law saying that notwithstanding that a law may be inconsistent with, for example, Section 19 and 21 of the Constitution, it shall have effect. Now, Trinidad has a formula something as that. Trinidad has a section in the Constitution, I think it is Section 13 of the Trinidad Constitution, which allows by a special majority to derogate from certain rights. So it says that Parliament can pass a law which is inconsistent with certain sections, which one may say is entrenched in the Trinidad context, if they expressly say that this law is intended, or notwithstanding that the law is inconsistent with certain rights, it is lawful. But for that to happen, a special majority is needed. And I am thinking that through the pathway of the Supreme Law Clause, which does not require a referendum to alter, one can pass laws which says, for example, notwithstanding that a particular law is inconsistent with something else, that it is lawful. This is just a rough outline of my thinking on that, but I believe that it is in fact a pathway, it is a gateway to making these changes. Now that's just from a legal standpoint. One may still say that politically we should have a referendum, right? One may say that politically we should have a referendum, so that the people can speak on the matter. But I think that that stricture of a 2/3 majority is something that we have to find a creative way to get around. And this is just my contribution to this thought process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lane, and thank you, Mr. Martin. We now open up the floor for questions. We have a mic, and I see, as I say mic, Mr. Michael Justme is ready with a question, comment. We will take a few. I invite Mr. Arley Gill as well as Dr. Alexis to join us on the head table for ease of answering questions. When you are asking your question or you're giving your comment, please state your name, your affiliation, and then go ahead. Thank you so much.
Name Michael Justme. I'm a student of history. I think I've been involved with quite a number of the folks inside here, like Angus Martin, Peter Antoine, and so trying to get Grenada having somewhat get back emancipation back on board. Let me first, I don't want to get into the referendum and other aspect of it, but let me first at least thank Dr. Alexis for his presentation. I also want to silently say to him, thank you for his stance over the years on a number of the proposed awards that they wanted to bestow on him. I know he stayed away from it because there are certain things that he did not believe or did not want his name to be linked with, whereas some other folks within the Caribbean accepted it, and it is somewhat of an issue. Dr. Alexis and also our committee, I just want to reflect on some of the historians who have been before us and so we have like Brother George Brizan, who said that Grenada island of conflict. We have Flying Turkey. We as a people, it seems as though we have a kind of crab in a barrel mentality, each other down. We have an ordinary Grenadian who said, brevity without discussion is madness. I think it's good that, to discuss. We also have, in the introduction, Raylan spoke about Dr. Alexis long and his just political career. We also had Herbert Augustus Blaze, who said that we need to hasten slowly. That was his mantra. And we also had Black Wizard, who said that the blood of our masters should not be shed in vain. I think we should combine our martyrs here. Should all combine all these and maybe look at how do we chart a way forward. Because I said to my brother Gill and also Angus that next year the world, the UN is celebrating the decade of people of African descent. Reparation is part of that. And I am yet to hear or believe, maybe I'm wrong, that Grenada to date has put in place some form of committee, some form of celebration, some form of recognition for that decade of people of African descent. We tend to speak about our nice and our heritage and how proud our heritage is. But our national flag, for donkey years, haven't got a national flag on it, or national flag pole. We are yet to bring in our heroes. Where is the Fedon? Where's our national dress? Where's our national institutions like the museum and libraries and so forth? Yes, we need to move towards having, let us get rid of the monarchy and external people. Let's have our own thing. But you're wondering, do we start now? Maybe we need, because next year we are heading for 50 years. But what it is that we can be so proud of? As a spice that is not registered, pure Grenada that is not registered, our market square, which is something to speak about, our sidewalk non-existent, our monuments that are not there, but we have an American monument. So we need some soul searching. We need maybe to go back to place. Let us hasten slowly. Yes, we need it. But this thing called institution, we are still doing things based on an individual basis. We have extremely poor and weak institutions. And a lot of them non-existent. So the heritage and the history and the culture of a country, they are representation, they are indicators. Where is your museum? Where is your library? Where is your open spaces? Where is your park? Our botanical garden, we say so Earth Matageri botanical garden, it starts where and end where? Carbon Park starts where and end where? Should we just continue saying things? We are asked by UNESCO to show us on our landscape our cultural heritage, our African heritage. Where do we have our African burial grounds? Where do we have our monuments? They are non-existent. Are we continuing to jump up for 50 years and say, oh, we have come, 21 years is adult, 50 is an old man? Are we coming to age? And I think these are the questions as we move towards 50 that we should hasten, not slowly this time, Blaise might be wrong in that one, we should put our foot right. If Barbados could use Newton, the slave burial ground, as a Republican symbol, what are we in Grenada intend to use next few months, 6 months, as our African heritage? Is it running in the street with a flambeau or something? These are my concerns. This is a question, because we see our directors, the Market Square Town Ghetto, this on everything. We have one of the worst rate in recent years of the urban sprawl in south of the island. The list go on and on. We need to put that. We need to come to age. And then and only then we can say, I go back to whether it's our anthem out, proud of our heritage. What heritage? Proud of our heritage. So there are a lot I can say, but I trust that we move, and we move speedily. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Dr. Alexis and everybody else inside here. My name is Nigel Algernon Theodore from Fontenoy, the son of Joyce Gill and George Gibbs. Dr. Alexis, I apologize for my lateness. But, when you have people cheering to teach karate, sometimes you teach them first. So I'm just coming from the dojo. Reparation is nice. Michael was my elder brother, and I'm speaking after Michael tonight. What a coincidence. And Ms. Cheryl Cotton taught me together with Mr. Chris G. Riggs from GBSS and Mr. Richard Duncan. So I'm home with my teachers, My question is, Doctor, are you willing to relinquish your QC or KC as we move forward to Republicanism? And then I'll ask the next question. Are you willing to do that, sir?
The day we get into Republicanism, immediately, instantaneously, I relinquish the case.
All right. Well, I know that head of the Regional Reparation Committees, Sir Hilary Beckles. I'm sorry that he's not here. But his country is a republic now, but he's still Sir. So at least, you'll do better than him in the future. Now, if we have to go Republican, I would want to have the Republican Party in Grenada. You had your party movement, and then PLM, So I would want to be the leader of the Republican Party in Grenada. But we we should not republicanize Grenada yet until we get what we are asking for, Brother Arley, reparation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chicken and egg conundrum. To me, you have to start somewhere. Look at Barbados. They started with CCJ, and then they tackled the more challenging issue of getting away from royalty. I would have thought that the CCJ would be an easier option. But if you don't mind, I do not agree that you have to first get reparations. It may be the other way around, actually. In that going republic, as Barbados has just done, may even help you to speak more firmly with the authorities in London. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Stand up. Peter Antoine. I just wanted to take the part that Ewart Lane raised and ask the question: if we are concerned about referendums, can we consider as well the question of reforming the Electoral Act to allow for citizens to vote, not just for representatives of the Parliament during elections, which will also be an opportunity to vote for such policies like the CCJ and the question of republicanism, if we have to do that? Because we still, the referendum will be on the basis of the 2/3 of the population that votes. So would that also be a part to consider?
Yeah, let me answer you and Ewart Lane together. There are some principles in the Constitution which you cannot alter simply by altering a particular clause in the Constitution. 3 of them are these. 1, the supremacy of the Constitution. 2, the separation of powers. 3, the rule of law. And the reason is that these principles so much are enwebbed throughout the Constitution that you cannot get rid of them just by changing a particular clause. Take the supremacy of the Constitution. When the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago was answering the question in 1967, Trinidad and Tobago did not have a supreme law clause in the Constitution. Let me repeat that. In the 1962 Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, which Sir Wooding was talking about, Hugh Wooding, that Constitution did not have the equivalent of Section 106 in Grenada, the Supreme Law Clause, and it made no difference because the supremacy of the Constitution does not rest on a particular clause saying that the Constitution is supreme. The Jamaica Constitution does not have a clause saying the Constitution is supreme. They don't use that word. The supremacy of the Constitution derives from a number of attributes of the Constitution. As, for example, the obligation on the part of Parliament to comply with requirements as to parliamentary special majorities, referendum majorities, the Bill of Rights. In other words, Mr. Lane, you can't get rid of the supremacy of the Constitution simply by altering Section 106. You cannot do it that way. Because even if you alter Section 106, you still have to come back to Section 39, which is the entrenching section. And you can't alter Section 39 by altering Section 106. So I applaud you for your ingenuity and your creativity, but that takes us only so far and no further. And it does not get us to replacing monarchism by republicanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alexis. We have another comment or question from the gentleman in the back.
Yeah, good evening to all. A little bit late, bad arrangement. Yeah, but my question is, I want to, the sister, she has already left, but she used a word to claim in a poem. That word claim, I don't know if Dr. Alexis or any well-known person inside here understand to claim. And you also use the word, the right to demand. But we keep regurgitating the old colonial past, like we're in a history class. I think what we gather here to do is to prove what we can do, what is our right, what we can demand, what we can claim. We're not here to beg the court or entrench or detrench, but we're here to claim and demand. That's the issue of reparation. It's illegal. You said it. I listen to you carefully. It's illegal. And if something is illegal, that means I stole your mangoes. I stole your money. Right? And you take me to court in Grenada. You put me to jail. This is the same thing the British has done. Illegal entry into Africa. Illegal entry in the Caribbean. Make money illegally and still sitting on it, and we keep wondering what we're going to do. It's time we claim and demand. You know, we're not singing no sweet song. You know, I don't know if you understand that. The brother mentioned about the market square. The market square was a killing tool for the white man, the European, the Frenchman. That was a abattoir. We can big up that. We have to set our own. And because the reason why it is a ghetto now is because of the colonial way of thinking in Grenada. It becomes a ghetto. And I'm glad it is a ghetto. So we could learn from it. Because in the ghetto, we come from, and the ghetto teaches that. So we have to stop colonializing ourselves. Because is that what's going on here? You know? We keep colonializing ourselves, you know. The other question, we're not looking at ourselves. We're looking at Barbados, we're looking at Trinidad, we're looking at England, we're looking at this one, this one. Are we looking at ourselves? Are we looking at ourselves? Anybody? Are we looking at ourselves? Are we like the skin? We like the color? We like the place we are? You know, it's several things, you know. The other question I have for you is that are we ready in the Caribbean, in Grenada, as an indigenous people? Are we ready? Do we have an indigenous tribunal, an indigenous court in Grenada that could take us forward? Or if not, are we ready to join the AIN, the Alliance of Indigenous Nations? Anyone aware of that? Is anybody aware of that? Nobody seems to be aware of that, what I'm saying here. So we're quite behind time. So all the smart people inside here tonight, look on your phone, you're going to see it if you're really smart. And if your phone is really smart, you're going to send you those smart issues. So, and if we're talking reparation, this is an indigenous factor. And we're not mentioning nothing indigenous. We're only mentioning dates of bitterness, pure bitterness. I didn't come here for bitterness. I come here to free my mental, wash out that mental slavery. But it seems that we keep reenacting that mental way, and we're saying we cannot do this and we cannot do that. Well, we had a revolution in Grenada. And that was against the English Constitution. And I don't know if you want us to do that again. It's possible. Because the way we're thinking, the people you're seeing in the ghetto, they will make the revolution because they are my people. And if we can't take them, if we can't take us from the ghetto, we go revolutionize it. And this is my word. So that's the
You, brother, use a phrase. I want to respond to it. Somebody take your mangoes, you take them to court. Now, we're talking reparations. What if the committee takes the UK to court on reparations and it goes to the Privy Council for answering? You really think that the Privy Council is going to say that what the British did to the Aboriginal people and what they did to Africans bringing them here, you really think that they're going to say that that was a crime against humanity and that Britain should pay reparations? Well, I would shudder to think if that gets to the Privy Council, we're going to be in a bad way.
You see,
I am sending out an emergency call. Let us get out of the Privy Council as soon as we can.
But how we do that?
The Constitution tells you how to do it. You have a referendum, and you, the people, have to come out and vote in favor of the referendum.
We'll leave it for
Thank you, Dr. Alexis. Thank you so much. We are going to take the final question or comment, and then we will wrap up this session this evening.
Good evening, everybody. My name is David Sinet, and I want to thank the presenters this evening for a splendid job. I want to commend the Reparations Committee for the job that they're doing. The presentation, Dr. Alexis, was very informative. I have struggled, however, with the linkage between the reparations and the trust for republicanism. Reparations for things that were done before. It seems as though the concept of being a republic is for us in the future. So I have struggled with that linkage, and I wonder if it benefits any of the parties going forward, linking the two together. You made a very brief statement as to what a republic is, and it speaks to a system where the head represents that state. Republicanism goes a little deeper than that, however, and it speaks to the core values of citizenry and the process that they play in the system of governance. A word comes up in a republic, foundational. The only other place I've seen that word legally was in the last referendum of 2016, when there was an attempt to amend our constitutions, and our preamble was supposed to be replaced by the word foundational. I am now seeing foundational linked to the process of republicanism, and I'm asking if you can explain that process to me, and what is similar now with this process and the process that took place in 2016 with the amendments that were supposed to be made to Chapter 1 of our Constitution. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, as I try to speak to the issue of the linkage between republicanism and reparations, as I indicated in my welcome remarks. Now, of course, the issue of reparations deals with repair for the harm that was caused by the former colonial masters and institutions and families and so on, indigenous genocide, slave trade, and slavery. So the historical perspective. And the issue of republicanism is an issue that persists today with regards to British monarchy being our head of state here in Grenada. I thought that Dr. Alexis expounded on the issue when he took us through the different judgments we had from the Privy Council, and he detailed the role that the British monarchy has played throughout with regards to the slave trade and slavery. And he asked the question, do we really want these royals to continue to be our head of state? I think Dr. Alexis had answered that question to provide that linkage. And I'll also join with him to say that we ought not to think that, and the question that Brother Gill posed, that we should get reparations first before republicanism, or vice versa. But of course, going republic, as Dr. Alexis pointed out, can strengthen our hand with regards to speaking forcefully, because we have that contradictions. I have done several interviews and so in the UK, well, of course, using the Zoom platform and so on, over the last couple of weeks, with the ascension of King Charles to the throne and the coronation and so on. Even the British public, especially the youth of Britain, they are questioning for themselves the continuing relevance of the British monarchy, the youth in the UK. And here we are, 50 years on, or almost, as an independent country. And the question or the issue of the monarchy continuing to be the head of state in Grenada is not on the national discussion table. In other words, there is no heated debate with regards to that particular issue. We continue to march on, we continue to move on, we continue to live, if not exist, by our Prime Minister and Ministers of Government continuing to swear allegiance. They continue to swear allegiance 50 years on to the King of England, whose ancestors enslaved our ancestors. I say no more. But I think, Madam Chair, we're reaching 9 o'clock.
Sure. I know that.
So, good evening, everybody, and I just want to, Dr. Alexis, I'm always impressed with your intellect, your deep understanding of these constitutional issues, and I really think you're a tremendous national asset, that's being underutilized, especially now. The issue of reparations for me is part of a discussion of how do we treat with our history? How do we make sense of the past in order to empower ourselves to move forward in a manner that is sustainable, is healthy, and will cause us to grow and feel good about who we are as a people. I once visited a museum in Brussels, Belgium, and it was an African museum, and I was traumatized like I never did before when I connected with history. Manacles, shackles, spike collars, all kinds of braces for the feet, and cages. To me, I was so traumatized that I left that museum and went to sit in a cafe just to purge myself of the experience as if I had been in a very dirty place.
And I think when we relate to history, there are 2 or 3 responses. There's the response where you run away from the museum and you sit in the cafe and you try to wash it out, right? And you suffer, maybe you join into a kind of amnesia, enforced amnesia. And I think in many ways, because of the deep trauma that we have experienced in history, it is a kind of amnesia, a collective amnesia that some people experience. So you can try and black it out, shut it out as if it never existed. A second way is what has been happening here, the reparations issue, trying to do right by history and seek justice. It's a difficult one because we are coming up against entrenched powers and socioeconomic systems and ideologies. And it may be an intergenerational relay. What is being done now may not be achieved now, but in the future, others will take it up, critical mass will grow, and maybe we break through. And, there are precedents. A lot depends on how organized and determined we are in the organization. The Jews knew how to do it. Now, one additional way we can treat with our history is to make some money from history. How do we monetize all the relics that were built by slave labor? And I think, it is part of the core responsibility of institutions like the Cultural Foundation and the museum to research, curate, document, give visibility to all these things that were built by slave labor on this very street, just across the prisons, former prisons in colonial times, military garrisons and things like that. So I'm basically saying we need to take a new approach to how we deal with history and empower ourselves. Reparations is part of it, but it is part of a comprehensive strategy for engaging with our history and moving forward. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much. At this point in time, we invite Tespa Peterson. She has some quick information to share with you all. And thank you so much for all your comments, questions. I know we'll have lots of conversation when this is over.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Alexis, for just the masterful way that you modeled how we make a case. Thank you, Arley Gill, the head of the Reparations Committee, and of course the moderator, Ms. Christine Lashington. My name is Tespa Peterson, and I'm here on behalf of the Indigenous Peoples Heritage Support Organization's Preparatory Committee, the Institute for People's Enlightenment, Dare to Understand and Enlightenment Series, and Caribbean Freedom Fighters, who on Sunday, May 28th, at 3 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, presents the 2023 Indigenous Peoples Heritage and Public Education webinar, which you can join via Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube. And this year's theme will be Le Monde des Sauteurs, Leapers Hill Remembrance Day, and Indigenous Peoples Heritage Day, memorializing May 30th, 1650, 373 years after. And this year's topic specifically will be Le Monde des Sauteurs, Leapers Hill, citation and excerpts from the Executive Director of the Museum, Mr. John Angus Martin's PhD dissertation, as well as a deep dive into the new and revised edition of the A to Z of Grenadian Heritage. The second edition is out. If you don't have a copy of it, please get one. It is my pleasure to be the moderator of that session that will be coming up on Sunday, so I invite you to come along. The Reparations Committee has also joined hands with us to support a special petition that we want to mount at the time to encourage a new approach to thinking about our Indigenous past and our Indigenous heritage in Grenada. And so I encourage you, if you can, to join us on Zoom this coming Sunday at 3 p.m. for our 2023 Indigenous Peoples Heritage and Public Education webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this point in time, I invite Sharon Pascal to deliver the vote of thanks for us this evening. And Sharon is of Kalinago descent, where I'm just learning.
A pleasant good night to everyone here at the National Museum, as well as our viewers who are viewing live on GIS Live and the Bob Report and any other platform streaming right now. It gives me great pleasure on the behalf of the Grenada National Reparations Committee to say thank you. Thank you to my colleagues at the Grenada National Reparations Committee for hosting such an auspicious event, for this much needed discussion and deeper enlightenment on the theme, Republicanism in the Age of Reparations. On this, our third annual lecture. To this, I say thank you. To Ambassador Arley Gill for his warm welcoming remarks. A very heartfelt thank you to our key speaker, Dr. Francis Alexis, for sharing on the theme and giving us a much clearer understanding of what republicanism is all about and how we can apply it to our country. I would like to say thank you to Reverend Tim Byam for invocating the Holy Spirit to bless our evening's proceedings, to Ms. Chrislyn Lashington for being our chair this evening, and to Ms. Donella Hosten for doing her poem. To this, I say thank you. Thank you also to Kellen Bob and to GIS for allowing us to use your platform to air this program this evening, and also to the National Museum for allowing us this venue. I will also like to say thank you to all the people who took part in our online survey, and to those who are listening here at the National Museum, as well as the people viewing online and on television. Once again, I say thank you to the Reparations Committee for the continued hard work that you have been doing for this long time. To you and to everyone, I would say good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pascal. Thank you to everyone for coming out and continuously demonstrating your eagerness to learn more about our history and our heritage here in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. I'm your host, Chrislyn Lashington. Have a great evening.
So there you have it, a lecture held by the Grenada National Reparation Committee. I applaud them for doing this because there's far too much African or Black people who do not want to be seen in this type of setting or want to have this kind of conversation. For whatever reason, many of them simply run away from it and they don't want to be reminded of anything. They just want to live life free as a bird, no responsibility, as it pertains to healing, moving forward, and rebuilding our own. Some simply wants to join hands with someone else. Okay, so here's my takeaway from this lecture, starting with Mr. Gailey, who was the chair of the committee. He was asked two questions, he said. The folks asked him two questions. The first was, how you ask for reparation with the monarchy still being the head of the state? And the second question is, what is the relevance of the monarchy? So these two questions can be coming from people who have two different mindsets. It could be people who genuinely wants to know, and they want to know because they would like to help the process with the process, and they would like to see us moving further. But there's also the ones, Africans, Black people, and others, who simply want to convolute or to stagnate the entire discussion about reparation or the process of Grenada and the rest of the Caribbean, or Africans as a whole, pulling themselves away from the monarchy or those who rule over them for many years. Next, we had 2 poems by Donella Hosten. And again, I applaud her. That takes a lot of bravery for her to do that. And I hope that she gets support. You know, people like this need support from the community. But anyway, she gave 2 poems, right? And even though I enjoy the poems, my only questions would be, is it that we are trying to hold hands and continue to help someone else build their home? Or is it that we are trying to rebuild what we lost? You know, because I realize that there are 2 types of pro-African, pro-Black people out there. There are those who are very vocal, but when you say anything about, hey, we need to build our own, we need to rebuild our own, we need to be able to support ourselves and take care of our own affairs without having to rely on anyone else. Then the other side, the other group of pro-Black or pro-African people, they don't want that. They just want to hold hands with other people. They want to help someone else build their home. They want to mix in every way, right? So that's where the problem comes in a lot of time. The host, Miss Lashington, while introducing Dr. Francis Alex, said something about Dr. Alex. She said, Mr. Alex believes this or thinks this way. As long as we give institutions in Britain a formal role in our constitutional affairs, we perpetrate lack of self-worth and self-esteem. And I couldn't agree with it more. His argument primarily is that slavery was illegal. It was illegal to Britain, it was illegal to England, and they broke their own law. So with that being said, they should be held accountable for breaking their own law. And he talked about planters receiving over 20 million pounds, while the folks who were enslaved, the Africans who were enslaved, received nothing. So those were the key points that he was hammering home, and he gave a lot of examples to support his position. Reparations was not the only talking point. They talked about how the country will go about becoming a republic, talk about referendums, getting 2/3 of the vote, etc. And my whole takeaway from that is Britain still makes the rules as far as how we get out of being underneath of them and having them as the top or the head of the state. So that should tell the civilian population something. So one of the guys asking questions at the end said he heard someone say that the discussion of reparation is madness. This goes to what I was saying in the beginning about some Africans simply don't want to have any talk about it. Right? He also talk about getting rid of the monarchy is one thing, and reparation is another thing, but it seems that he was alluding to the fact that there is not enough pride. He do not see pride, and that is so true. This leads back to education. If we're not teaching that in their early years of school or learning, then the people are going to grow to not have pride. And another thing is that we seem to celebrate European, American things far too much. And the Rasta, at the end of the questions, he talked about it. You know, he talked about us just wanting to uphold certain things that was pushed upon us. We want to uphold the colonized mindset. He talked about that. It's as if we want to let go, but we don't want to let go. So until we learn to flip it over and let go of a lot of these things, most of these things, then we're going to continue going in circles.